hopefully this is working. So I hope I'm doing this right. So feedback is the first main area in the unit. And, I went through a lot in my 1B talking about learning goals. I really love our proficiency scales. I love how they group and organize information, but I know I don't use them quite as proficiently as the name proficiency scales might imply. I think that one of the things that I really need to be able to do is to tie the resources that I use more into a scope and sequence and provide more ways for kids to really be able to measure their growth. I still haven't quite broken out of that traditional teacher mindset where, okay, here's my scope and sequence. I know what we're going to do, but the kids don't necessarily know. And that definitely struck home actually last night in my parent teacher conferences when one of my parents was like, well, how do I know when they've earned a 3.0? Like, when is it appropriate? And I didn't have a good answer for them. So making sure that my kids know what they're learning when they're learning is something that I'm still struggling with. I say I'm okay. My kids are learning. They usually do really well, but doesn't necessarily mean that they're going. The second part of it, using assessments. I love assessment. Okay, I love watching my kids learn. I love watching them work. I love informal assessment, and I love Empower because I can put so much into it and I can show my kids learning in so many different varied ways. I don't care how a kid shows me they're learning as long as I see it. If that comes from a one-on-one conversation with them, that's awesome. If they turn in a piece of paper with something on it, that's awesome. We did this homophone thing, and one of my little girls was like, well, can I make a poster for the homophones? And I went, yeah, go do it. That's awesome. And she made these awesome posters with homophones. And that's evidence. She knows what a homophone is, and she's never going to forget it. I do give tests. I do think that there needs to be routine check-ins with, okay, do the kids got it? Okay, do they still have it 3 weeks later? And so I do use, pen and paper tests. They do take CMAS at the end of the year, so I need to make sure that they're prepared for that. I try and grade my tests in a really, really quick turnaround so that they can see it. Whenever we do like a bigger test, I'll grade it right as they're finishing it so that they get a chance to look at it and go, oh, I didn't carry my one. Okay, I'll fix that right now, because they know it. And they just had a momentary of, oh, I wasn't thinking right then. Content is the next area of the explicit model. And I do use direct instruction. For a while there, it was like direct instruction had become a dirty word, but it really isn't. I mean, you can't use inquiry type teaching for everything, because not every kid is going to see patterns. Not every kid is going to see things unless it's pointed out to them. Like some kids will. Like I've got some gifted kiddos in my class this year who I say something once and they've already extrapolated it to the nth dimension and back again. And then I've got kiddos that are like, wait, every time I add 2, no, I don't understand. Try that again, Miss Summers. And so I have to meet both of those kids there. And direct instruction is a really good way to do it, especially with that gradual release and incorporating, Kagan into that, where my kids are working together. They're bouncing ideas off of each other. I love direct instruction when I'm introducing something new, especially because I know that they need that straight on, this is the thing that I need you to know. This is how you do it. Now we're going to practice it together, and then we can move on to practicing it by ourselves. And that leads into the structured practice and knowledge deepening. Sorry, I just lost my earrings. Lessons. Kids have to practice things. Nobody learns how to do something on the first try. And so I try really hard to cycle back to things. If I've taught it 2 weeks ago, probably time for us to practice it again. If it's been a month, you know what? Maybe we need to throw in an activity today to go back to it, whether it's, hey guys, we're going to do a quick rally coach, or it makes it onto their list of literacy assignments for the week, or math. There always has to be that coming back around to it so that they're getting that practice. Anytime we're reading something, I try and shove as many proficiency scales on every single text that I possibly can. It might mean that we spend 2 weeks on a single story, but that gives me the opportunity to cycle back to it again and again. I see the power in doing like a unit on, okay, here's our narrative, and we're going to do this whole thing on narrative. But I want to make sure that they can take and apply it, which takes us, to that next, the knowledge application lessons. I need to be able to make sure that what I've done, I bring back again. It can't ever be in isolation. I love being a part of STEM. I know I said that in my 1B, but I think that we have a lot of freedom here that not all teachers have, where if I want to take a day and do a deep knowledge application lesson, I can. I can take and say, okay, today we're going to take this piece of math and this piece of literacy and this piece of science, and we're going to tie them together into something new. I can do that. I have the freedom. I don't think I could ever teach anywhere else, because this is the kind of teaching that I enjoy and I love. And it's the kind of things that, kids want to do. They want to tie their knowledge together. I do kind of fall out. I do kind of get stuck, especially like in my direct instruction, where it's kind of the same every time. We'll have, introduce the lesson with some kind of instruction, a think, pair, share, or a rally coach to do that bit. And then we'll take it to the next step and another rally coach or think, pair, share, and then some kind of exit ticket. And I almost wonder if I'm getting predictable and boring while doing that. And it works, but I almost wonder if I'm losing some of my kids while I do it. I've got a deep toolkit, but I don't think I always use it as much as I could. The next area is context, and engagement is key. I tell my kids I have like eyes in the back of my head, and I can see when they've stopped working. And I think one of my biggest goals this year is I want my kids to be able to self-identify when they're on task versus when they're not. Because right now I'm hearing a lot of, I was just thinking, Miss Summers. I'm like, well, your eyes were elsewhere. Your pencil was in your desk and your papers weren't out yet. So I don't think that we were actually thinking yet. And I want them to be able to self-identify their own engagement levels. We also talk about things like, how do I know I'm listening? And the benchmark that I give my kiddos for that is, if you can repeat back what the person has just said, even if you don't understand it, if you can repeat back the words, you were probably listening. If you look at them and go, I have no idea the words that just came out of your brain, out of your mouth, then you probably weren't listening. And I really would like them to walk out of level 3 this year having a self-awareness of their own engagement levels, and really being able to pick apart their own unique successes. I do teach in small group literacy and math. I'll do the occasional like grammar whole group lesson. But really, like, how can I know if every kid is actually reading the story unless I'm there to watch their mouth move? How can I know that every kid is actually doing the math lesson if I'm not there to see it? And I feel like when I do Hope group lessons, because I tried it for a little bit again this year, I always try it. I just don't feel like they're getting that depth and rigor, because they do disengage. Even in the best lessons, there's always something more interesting. Yeah, that was a little confusing. So we'll see how this goes. I love rules. I love procedures. I'm pretty no nonsense. I was raised in rural Colorado near Vail. It was a small little cow town called Gypsum. And I was raised with a very rural mentality of get over it. This is the way it is. And I bring a lot of that into my classroom. I want my kids to be able to run my class even if I wasn't here. There's that book, and I can't remember the author right now. It's called Flying Solo, and it's about this group of sixth graders whose teacher is not there that day, and for one reason or another, they don't get a sub, but the class runs really smoothly for the most part without an adult there. And that's what I want my classroom to be like. The kids know what they're responsible for. The kids can run it. They can self-manage themselves. They can self-manage each other. And they just know how to do school. Because then that frees me up to be able to teach and to interact with kids and work on them. When Henry's having a bad day, I can spend 15 minutes sitting with him, helping him problem solve and calming him back down. And the rest of my class just works because they know what happens. As I said in my 1B, we do set up a class code of conduct. Right now, we actually had to go back and revamp our class code once. We've got wait your turn, mind your own business, because I really want them to be responsible for themselves first rather than others. Finish your work before helping others. We talked about like how on an airplane, you have to put your gas mask on before you help, like a baby or something, because that's how you can do your own learning. You have to do your own learning before you can help somebody else. Follow directions, spend your time wisely. Time management is a huge thing we're working on. Be honest and then use an appropriate voice level. And I don't know if I come back to that as often as I need to. It's a few more things than my typical class code. But we did write it together. I don't know. My class works. I'm not quite sure how to say it. But I don't get a lot of pushback from my kiddos for the most part. Like I have some high needs kids and sometimes I'll get some pushback from them. But for the most part, my kids go, okay, this is something we need. If they ask me why, I'm like, talk to me at recess, talk to me in the hallway, grab me lunch, and we'll talk about those type of things. My classroom is just tight. And maybe I'm a control freak, but it works for my students. I had a parent-teacher conference with my highest need kiddo yesterday. That was probably my best parent-teacher conference ever. And she told me it was her first positive parent-teacher conference with her son ever. And he's in third grade, which makes no sense to me. Like, how can this be the first one? But I know that he's had, some first-year teachers and some teachers who just weren't in the right grade level for their skills. And just having the management that I have has made him successful in school for the first time. So I know there's things to work on, but my class runs. I think the biggest reason why it runs is my building relationships. My kids are my babies. I said that in my 1B. I'm going to say it again. These are my children. I can't have kids of my own. So every year I adopt 26 new kids and they become mine. I obsess over them. I go home and I talk at my husband till he's like, okay, all right, we got it. And I'll go, oh, but do you remember about Virginia? And he's like, he knows all their stories because I've told him about them. every single